Good afternoon, everybody. Let the record show it is 6 p.m. and we'll call to order the special July 30th, 2019 council meeting for the city of Durant. Please stand while Chief Hauser leads us in the invocation and remain standing while Councilman or Vice Mayor Steve Brittingham leads us in the flag salute.
Allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please be seated. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Morris,
here.
Councilmember Shear,
Here.
Councilmember Tomlinson,
Here.
Vice Mayor Brittingham,
Here.
Mayor Groby.
Here. Let the record show we have a quorum. All members are present. I guess I ought to welcome everybody again since I did it the first time, maybe a little early. But anyway, welcome everybody. We're going to get started right away. Our first order of business, number 1, consider approval of Enterprise Fleet Management Equity Lease Open-End Equity Lease Rate Quote 4306977 for the lease of 7 2020 Police Chevrolet Tahoes. Chief Hauser. Took me longer to say that than did you to get up front.
Well, I don't know. It took me a long time to write it. As you all know, thank you for the opportunity, but in August of 2018, we entered into an agreement with the Enterprise Fleet Management, not for the purchasing of cars, but for the lease and fleet management of cars. The difference, main difference being we purchased the cars, they're ours through the life of the car, versus a fleet management program to where at the end of the lease, which is 5 years, currently we're running on about 10 years on owned cars. At the end of 5 years, we have options, buy those outright or let them manage that sale for us and reinvest, if you will. So that's the difference between a lease and a purchase. So we decided to go with lease in 2018. Enterprise is a state contract vendor through TIPS, an interlocal purchasing system, if you will. They've provided for us this year lease pricing of the Tahoes, and they also provided for us lease pricing for Ford, both utility vehicles. The Ford pricing come in at a what they call a total capitalized amount of $46,905. So it's my understanding that that amount is the cost of the car plus the cost of the upfit, and that's the equipment that goes in those cars, for a lease, total monthly lease of $847, which is much, much higher than the Tahoes come in. And I'm looking at the 2020 Tahoes. The total capitalized amount on those is actually, I believe it was $38,658. And again, that's the cost of the car plus the upfit cost. That's the equipment, the installation of those. The upfit and installation cost is about $8,444. That's what it was last time with all equipment installed. So you take that off, you're getting a Tahoe of about $30,000, and then adding that cost in there. And I may be wrong, it may be a $34,000 because it looked like the capitalized price reduction was already taken out about 50%. So if you purchase a car, then the $8,000 upfit is your responsibility along with the purchase price of the car. If you lease the vehicle, they allow us to lease the upfit costs at 50% away and finance the rest of that, which is some cost savings to us up front, and then financing that long term over the period of 60 months. And compared to the Ford was, as I said, $847 a month, and the Tahoe is $705.94. compare that to the price that we paid last year for the Tahoes, I believe it was $732. So actually they went down. The 2020 Tahoes actually went down in price from last year's. And again, that is on a TIPS state contract price through Enterprise. Again, the itemized equipment and labor pricing locally, and I say locally because Shipman Communications, the one that got the bid for the upfit cost, was $8,444. That includes all the upfit equipment and the installation of the product. 50% of that would be our cost with a lease. If you purchase the vehicle outright, 100% of that per vehicle is our cost. Last year, we had a little problem with Enterprise, and I'm going to say it probably wasn't their fault because by the time we ordered the vehicles, and we ordered the Fords, 2019 Fords, but Ford, after we'd placed our order in the allotted time, moved their order time up and said, we're not going to build your cars. So that put us in a kind of a pickle. We had to go from the 2019 Fords and make a decision, either the 2020 Fords or the 2019 Tahoes. And based on the time frame that we were told, the best option was going to be the 2019 Tahoes because the 2020 Fords were several months out, plus more expensive than the 2019 Fords were, as you can even see in the paperwork that I had tonight. Excuse me. So we decided to go with the 2019 Chevrolet product for this last lease purchase, which was our first lease purchase with Enterprise. That delivery date, where we was expecting earlier, actually, we was expecting January, February, and here we are. We just got our first 10 out on the street just a few weeks ago, and I attribute a lot of that to Chevy's production process. It was through Thanksgiving, through Christmas, and their shops were shut down. So that delayed our process a lot for the build. It ain't like they're going and buying these cars off the lot. They're ordering them, then building them, spec'd out. We did in the past look at places like Defender Supply. They do Dallas's cars, I understand. We've looked at other companies before for both, their state contract pricing. There's upfit costs as well. Enterprise seemed to be right in line, I thought, with what we were trying to do. In the past, we've had other vehicles. We've had Crown Victorias. We've had Dodge Chargers. With the Dodge Chargers, the mileage is about the same. We're getting anywhere from 10 to 12 miles out of a Tahoe versus out of a Charger. But the maintenance fees for the Charger are much, much higher. Maybe our garage, if you had any questions, could answer how much higher than those. But the brakes, the front ends aren't trying to be politically correct here. They're not suitable for the roads of Durant, as like a utility vehicle would be. So we have problems with our front ends. We've had some problems with the top ends of the engines as of late. Of course, they've got some age and some miles on them too. And seems like the officers seem to think that those utility vehicles are holding up just a little bit better. And I think I would agree with those. I'll tell you what I would like to do, and we don't include that in the upfit cost, but the integration of a camera system, whether and there's a perfect company out there that integrates vehicle cameras and body cameras, and they're integrated. They're pricey. You're probably talking about $4,000, $5,000, $6,000 per unit per car just in the camera system. But maybe in the future, if you guys would entertain it, I didn't include that on these lease purchase cars, but maybe in the future that's something that we can look at. I guess in short, a lease versus a buy, you can spend the money up front and own the car, but I think what the council decided to do with this last go-around is go with a lease purchase. I'm sorry, a lease with the option to purchase at the end, just based on a fleet management program. They'll sell the cars for us at the end. We don't have to worry about doing that if we decide to get rid of the car. Historically, once we take a police car to its life end, we're getting $300 to $500 out of it. With the lease management program, we don't have to deal with the sale at the end of it. If it's a lemon, we can give it back, let them sell it. If it's something that's served us well and we want to continue its life, we can buy the lease out and continue on. So, having said all that, You guys approved $63,000 in capital improvement, and with the lease program, that'll get me 7 Tahoes with the upfit cost. Now, understand, if you do the math on that, that $63,000 is not gonna go and pay for 12 months worth of cars plus the upfit. But what we did is we figured in, the order time, the production time, the upfit time, and we're looking at paying about 7 months of that lease and then using what was left over with that money for the upfit cost at 50%. So what I'm asking and recommending you guys to do is go with the 2020 Tahoes, which come in at even less than we paid for the last 10, and on the lease program that we're already a part of.
Chief Hauser, does radar come in the upfit from Shipman or?
No, a radar unit's about $3,000 just under per unit, and that's not included. But what we can do, most of our cars, if not all of our cars, already have radars in them. We can move them from one vehicle to another. That's what we're doing with these last 10.
Okay, I don't know anything about radar except it can get you out there, but does it have to be updated? I mean, is our radar out of style? Is that what I'm asking? Or is it
What we've
still
been
good
ordering in the
enough?
past is the Stalker, called dual sensing radars, or the MPH B3 direction sensing radars. And they're both comparable. We stopped ordering the MPH years ago, and we're into the Stalkers. When you say updated, they change models periodically. I just took 5 radar units. I drove them down last week or the week before to Richardson. That's their factory. And I had 4 units that were just sitting around in boxes that had been taken out of some old cars and just tossed aside. And I took them down there and had them diagnostically checked, and they all checked just fine. So we'll probably reuse those.
The only other thing I would like to say is in the state of Texas, it's mandatory that cameras be in cars, police cars, from what
It's a good
I
idea.
And somewhere down the line, I would like to see that here, and I'm not sure which would be best to have it in, mounted in the car or actually on the officer themselves, but I would somewhere like to see that.
Yeah.
So somewhere down the line, if you could get us a price on what it would cost, I'd like for that at some point to.
And we might qualify for some OMAG.
OMAG
grant,
gives
too.
$10,000
Yeah.
for body worn cameras.
Yeah.
And you said, you made the statement, I don't know what would be best. Best is the integrated system where you have it in the car and you have it on the officer as well. That way, if you turn the camera on with the officer, it automatically comes on the car. So you get multiple views, one from the car and wherever the officer's at. I mean, that's best. So
Okay.
I can certainly get you those numbers. I'd be happy to.
I don't know about the other guys, but I would like to see something like that, in the near future. We haven't had anything really bad happen, but it's best to be safe.
All it takes is one.
Absolutely, and I
Exactly.
appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Let me ask you a question right along the same line. I think you said OMAG gives us $10,000. It's about 2 vehicles, right? 2 units. How many do we have, total units?
On patrol, about 35.
35. Okay.
And that's not counting the reserve staff.
And how much of these, is this, I'm kind of getting off subject here, I guess, but
The
how much?
cameras have, what's the cost? I'm gonna throw a number out there, but it's gonna be roughly, probably around that 6,000 mark. A lot of times, when you start thinking about cameras though, and again, I know we're maybe off subject a little bit, but don't just think about the equipment. Now you have the software, the storage maintenance, that's where your cost comes in. And that's up, I just looked at some body cameras, and the cameras were $1,000 a piece for the officers, but the software, when you start having storage systems and things, then you're looking at like $28,000 for storage.
Thank you.
Just had a couple more short.
No,
questions.
absolutely.
When we do the state contract, if I understand that properly, then we do not have to go out on bid.
That's correct. And Enterprise is a TIP state contract. It's
Okay.
TIPS by board, if you will.
And the vehicles that were previously purchased had a maintenance contract, if I'm not mistaken, or a maintenance agreement of some sort?
They do. They have a maintenance agreement of $7 a month, and that's only for a pass-through. So if we take it for our oil changes, for instance, if we took it to an Enterprise certified or contracted service center, then they would bill Enterprise. Enterprise would just pass that at no additional cost other than the $7 a month to us. With our first 10, we've already hit some oil change mileage, if you will, and it just didn't make sense to take it to an Enterprise certified dealer when our garage is doing it for free.
And then it's roughly, we don't have the actual printout. I know you don't have it all with you as far as that goes. Can you give them just a general idea of what's gonna be on the upfit, what all that includes?
Oh, absolutely.
I know you can't.
The,
probably
and
give-
I'm gonna forget something, but if we can go from the front of the car to the back of the car, a push bumper with some grill lights, red and, when I say lights, I'm talking about emergency flashing lights. Some in the headlights, I think, that are clear, move up to the top. You've got the overhead, light bar, which is probably one of the biggest expenses. It's somewhere around $2,000-$2,500 if I remember right. Move down into the inside of the car, you have your console, you have your cage partitions. Move into the back of the car, you have some more emergency lighting. It's a very basic package for $8,000, to be honest with you. We'd love to have more lights on the sides and around, but money only goes so far.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Just for curiosity, approximately how much mileage would be on a cruiser that we retire?
It depends on who they're assigned to, but
I'm just wondering.
you're going to roughly probably average about anywhere from 10 to, I'm going to say 15,000 miles per year per car. And I get that number based on, we're running some 10-year cars right now. They're 2009s, and some of them have 85 to 90,000 miles on them, and some of them have 120,000 miles on them. So
Well, that doesn't sound like much to me. I'm surprised that it's so low, actually.
yeah. And I'm just shooting that out there as an average. Some might be more, some might be less.
I was expecting 250,000.
Yeah. No, our 2009s right now, I think the probably the most, about 120, 125,000. I haven't looked in a while mileage wise, but it seems like last time I did, that seemed to be the high end of the mileage.
Are there any other questions?
Well, thank you guys for the opportunity to present this for you tonight.
Thank you very much, Chief Housen. Are we ready for the vote?
I move approval of the Enterprise Equity Lease Open-End Lease Rate Quote 4306977.
We have a second.
I second.
We have a motion. We have a second. Will the clerk please record the votes? Or is there any further discussion before we do that? Anybody else? Okay. Will the clerk please record the votes?
Councilmember Morris,
Aye.
Councilmember Shear,
Aye.
Councilmember Tomlinson, Vice Mayor Brittingham,
Aye.
Mayor Groby.
Aye. Motion carries. The next item on our agenda, number 2, consider acceptance of Street and Infrastructure Task Force Committee Report, and I believe that is Mr. Mike Davis. And Mike, before you begin, I think speaking on behalf of everyone that served on the committee, you did an outstanding job, and we appreciate that very, very much.
Well, thank you, Mayor Groby. The credit certainly goes to all of the members of the task force, voting and non-voting. I believe every single person that was on the task force is here today, and we certainly appreciate your appreciation. Mayor Groby, to the council, my name is Mike Davis. I was the appointed chair of the Durant Streets and Infrastructure Task Force that was created by this council at the beginning of the year, actually at the end of last year in December of 2018. I hope the clicker works here. There we are, good deal. Okay, so I want to, I've got quite a few slides. I'm going to try and rush through them, but I don't think I'm going to be telling you anything that isn't a surprise. I think that is a surprise because each of you have received our report, our written report, and I hope have browsed it, have perused it. And so I hope that this can be an opportunity for you to ask me questions or to direct questions to members of the task force so that we can characterize how we arrived at our conclusions, how we arrived at our recommendations, and what we believe is the best way forward. Why do we exist? Well, we were created by a city council resolution in December of 2018. And this was sort of in the aftermath of the failure of a bond issue for funding some streets improvements. And the kind of the open question at the time was, well, we have a bunch of streets issues that are facing the city. We have some issues with our water treatment plant and wastewater treatment plant that are facing the city. What should we do in response to those challenges? I believe that the task force rose to the challenge and gave an appropriate and measured prescription for those challenges. The charge of our task force, as set by this council, was to review existing streets and infrastructure and examine their condition, to identify, repair, and replacement opportunities, to receive input from members of the public on these matters, which we did, and to draft a report to the City Council, which you have received. The members of the task force who are all present today, Mayor Gruby, Councilman Jerry Tomlinson, Durant citizen Charles Bachman, our emergency manager James Dalton, citizen Dr. Michael Similescu, our vice chair Kevin Keener, and your chair, myself. We did information gathering from the public consistent with our charge from the City Council. We held a town hall format meeting in the library on April 18th. We had more than 30 members of the community show up. I would say a solid 10 to 12 of them actually spoke to the members of the task force, all of whom were present, to share their concerns. Almost 100% of the concerns shared at that town hall were about streets, okay? And I think that the common theme in that town hall was that there wasn't a specific area of town where our streets are problematic, to use diplomatic language, that the problem seems to be spread sporadically all across town. Every citizen had their own story, so to say. We also reviewed the 2018 community survey that was done by the City of Durant, the one that was sent out by mail, and we did our own online survey that received 380 responses, many of which were submitted with a narrative, which was requested by the task force, and I have supplied for you in our report all of those, minus one that was really just some curse words. We took that one out. You didn't need to see it. We didn't need to see it. So starting with the water treatment plant, these were our findings. First of all, it's old. It was originally built in 1907. It has lasted us a long, long time. It's been built and rebuilt and maintained over the years. We found it to be well maintained. The staff are to be commended for the way that they have managed that facility. It is antiquated, but overall it is a sufficient facility. It is operating at 56% capacity even after all these years. So that's pretty neat. We don't have to expand our capacity of our water treatment plant. 6.72 million gallons a day when it actually can go all the way up to 10 to 12 million gallons a day. So that's a pretty important finding of the task force, not exorbitant costs to rehabilitate that facility because we don't have to expand its capacity to treat water. That said, here is what we found. We found that there is an intake valve on the Blue River that is defunct and needs to be rehabilitated as a backup intake valve. We found that a security system is needed. We needed new raw water pumps. We need a new mixing basin, new controls and electronics, a backwash filtration system, and a treated water transfer system. Now, I want to say real quick that no member of the task force, as far as I'm aware, is a civil engineer. And we certainly, we relied a lot on the expertise of city professionals and our deliberations in our committee, our research, for lack of a better word, in the determination of these priorities. Our recommendation for the water treatment plant is approximately at a price tag of $2 million to rehabilitate the existing water treatment plant. Luckily, we don't need to increase its expansion. The wastewater treatment plant is a slightly different story. While it is well maintained, and we also compliment the folks that run that facility and have been doing a very good job, they're facing some challenges that are not of their own creation. The challenges are that the capacity has almost been reached. And in fact, during, I guess you could say, during high rain events, extreme rain events, they are pushing right up against the far edges of their capacity already, creating a lot of challenges for the staff out there. Current average flow of 2.91 million gallons a day, projected to be 3.55 in 2023 to 2024, which is the capacity, okay? That's the average flow. It depends on rainfall and that type of thing because there is infiltration from weather-related events that affects our wastewater treatment plant. All right, so expansion is urgent. That means that the costs are a little bit more significant. We have to create a sand and grit removal basin. We need more sludge thickening, new clarifiers, filters, digesters, and electrical systems, sequence batch reactor, generally all the items necessary to expand capacity to 4.5 plus million gallons per day. So the price tag, like I said, a little bit more expensive, approximately $10 million upgrade, not rehabilitation, but also upgrade to the facility to expand its capacity. So the question is, and part of our charge was identify financing options. How do we pay for these big ticket items? Well, we found that the normal way to finance the upgrades, rehabilitations, and general capital investment for these types of improvements is built into the system, that we have utility rates and we have utility fees. And for the paying customers that use our sewer, that use our water, they might need to see a fee added to their bill that pays for the upgrades to these facilities. That's normal. That's the way it seems that most cities and towns in Oklahoma do it. The task force did not want to deviate from that, and therefore we recommend to the council the normal method. These fees are typically either a flat fee, which is to be the same per resident. Some municipalities do it that way. Or some municipalities will have a different fee per resident depending on their amount of water usage, okay? We deliberated in the task force on what would be the best way forward. Do we want a flat rate? Do we want one that is sort of prorated depending on the amount of water that a account user uses? And we decided to sort of split the baby. We believe that we can balance progressive and regressive effects of the implementation of a fee to the Durant citizens for their water usage and sewer usage by taking half of the total cost. Remember, we're talking about roughly $12 million total cost. Take half of the total cost, $6 million, and make that a flat fee per resident, spread it around, okay, per monthly utility bill. Take the other half, the other $6 million, and have that be determined based on use. That's our recommendation to the task force. And our report directly states, it says, this will balance the progressive and regressive effects of a rate increase so that the Durant community shares the cost of these fees in a fair and balanced manner. And what's the total cost that we're looking at for a typical user? Well, Durant residents are billed for their water usage. And if you consume 2,000 gallons or fewer, you kind of have the mandatory minimum rate. And many of the Durant residents, most Durant residents are at that rate. There are some exceptions, of course, for high water users, that type of thing, people with multiple accounts also. In general, what we're talking about for a minimum user, somebody who doesn't exceed 2,000 gallons a month in usage, is going to be approximately a total of $7.20 or slightly less per month on their utility bill to pay for these projects. Okay. Obviously, there are folks who have multiple accounts, and there are folks who use more than 2,000 gallons of water per month, because half of the rate is calculated on a usage-based formula. They would end up paying a little bit more than that, or a lot more than that, especially for industrial use. Okay. We had a few other recommendations related to water and wastewater distribution and collection, not just the treatment plants, but the distribution and collection systems. We're talking about pipelines all around town. One of our task force members brought to the table the concept of impact fees, which currently the city of Durant doesn't implement, but we could, at least could start phasing them in. Our report recommends that the City of Durant begin to develop a system and a rate structure for impact fees to ensure that fewer municipal funds are spent on the initial installation of new lines in areas built by developers. Now, one thing that we learned in our research on this as we were drafting our report is that the state of Oklahoma has quite a few restrictions on how municipalities are allowed to collect those impact fees. Among those restrictions are that the fee can't exceed the actual cost of the installation of the pipelines. We can't make money off of it. It just subsidizes the cost of the installation of new lines. That's just one of the restrictions. There are many. It's only to developers, not to individual home construction, that type of thing. But it is a potential way, a potential avenue to grow revenue to the city that can help us subsidize the expansion of infrastructure in this area. Other items related to water and wastewater distribution and collection. We are recommending some studies be done because there were some holes in our research in our ability to recommend fixes to the city's infrastructure. Particularly 3 specific studies: a water loss study, a stormwater drainage study, and a wastewater collection and infiltration study. Why do we need these studies? Because we don't know what to fix if we don't know what's broke, right? We don't know where the leaks are, therefore how do we fix them? We don't know how much water infiltration is happening into our wastewater treatment plant system, and we need to find the places where that infiltration is occurring, because it might very well expand our capacity if we fix some of that infiltration problem, and keep us from having to expand at least at the rate that we currently have to expand. Any questions at this point? Okay. We're also recommending that the city take into account the way that the Durant City Utility Authority money is used. Currently, Durant has no committed funding mechanism for the continued repair and replacement, especially the construction of new water lines and sewer lines. It's kind of done on an ad hoc basis. We transfer about $1.6 million a year from the DCUA to pay for capital improvement for the rest of the city. And I want to be clear, that means not just on pipelines then. That means that that $1.6 million that we transfer from the City Utilities Authority for infrastructure purposes is spent on things like roads, on things like fire trucks, trash trucks. And part of that is because the 1 penny sales tax that we currently have in place for capital improvements is largely swallowed up by debt service, okay? And so the city had to find a way to still continue to improve its infrastructure. Borrowing from the DCUA, or not borrowing, transferring from the DCUA, is the way that it has been done. Our theory is, as the city pays down those debts and therefore frees up that money that comes from the 1 penny capital improvement tax, we can stop transferring quite so much from the Durant Utilities Authority and therefore use that money the way it was really intended and for the purpose that it was originally raised, which is to say, buy new water lines, repair, existing infrastructure. I'll be sort of honest. One of the things that the task force sort of punted on was the question of water pressure in our fire hydrants. It's a problem that almost seems too ununderstandable to tackle because we haven't studied the problem and we don't know exactly where all the problems are. Well, when we start transferring this money back to or stop transferring it out of the DCUA, maybe we can learn a little bit more about those problems and improve that infrastructure. Okay. Now roads. Everybody wants to talk about roads, right? This is, and I'm just doing for illustrative purposes, this was fixed, by the way. These are some pretty bad potholes. This is back behind Pruitt's Grocery. They were fixed. This is Tennessee Street and South 9th Avenue, looking at the bar. I went out on a rainy day so that it kind of highlights where the problems are. This is 19th Street, looking south. This is the far east section of Alabama, looking west. This is the far west section, looking west of Alabama. I'm not sure it qualifies as a street anymore. once again, I want to say, I'm not judging any prior decisions made by anyone or prior councils. We're just presenting the facts. I'm illustrating that the problem's all over town. We're not just talking about a few streets. We're talking about roads that have turned into canals, right? This was submitted, I pulled this off of Facebook by a friend, but this is from yesterday. This is Lake Main Street. And kind of the point I want to make here is, first of all, we didn't get a whole heck of a lot of rain yesterday. We got some, and that was the problem that was created from that rain. And so as we begin to talk about our recommendation on streets, you're going to see that we focus on the big ticket items a little bit, Main and University. This is part of why, because what creates this problem, this water on the roadway here, is not something that can be fixed by mere repaving, right? There's been a lot of positive attention to the repaving of Washington and Radio Road lately. You could do that to Main Street, you'd still have this water problem because that paving doesn't include drainage, right? It doesn't include subsurface drainage, at least. And so that's why everybody says, well, why does Main Street cost, more than $5 million? This is why. It requires total substructure replacement, a lot of subsurface drainage, and then going back over and paving it to make it a long-lasting road that you don't have to rip up and fix over and over. Okay, so illustrative purposes only. Durant has more, this might surprise, this statistic surprised me. Durant has more than 196 miles of paved streets within the city limits, if you actually were to put them end to end. The lowest quality of road repair, we were provided kind of a really good rubric by the city engineer, Brandon Wall, that ranks different road construction on a scale of 1 through 5. You can build a level 1 road, which is the lowest quality road. That's just putting blacktop down, okay, about 1.5 inches of it, not even much. That's what we call a 3-year road, okay? And then you can go from there. You can build a 2 to 5 year road, you can build a 10-year road, which would be a level 3 road, a 20-year road, level 4 road, and then you can build a 50-year road, which is made out of cement instead of asphalt, okay? We kind of toyed around with those numbers a little bit as we were figuring out what does the city need to do with its roads. And the lowest quality road, that 1.5 inch overlay, which would last only 3 years, if we put those over every single roadway in Durant today, the total cost would be $40 million. And I only say that not because every road needs that. I only say that for illustrative purposes, that when we're talking roads, we're talking a lot of money. Unavoidably, we're talking about a lot of money. And we can fool ourselves into thinking it's not, but that's the case, right? The best estimate, and this comes from the engineer, over the next 25 years, we need about $37.75 million in road surface investment. Now, the problem with that number isn't necessarily the total amount. The problem is that it's front-loaded, that the issues exist now, and about 20 to 25 of that total 37.75 needs to be done in the next 7 years. Probably not going to be able to do it, but that's what would be the appropriate response, considering the condition of the roads. So that's kind of the challenge we face. We're in a hole, and we've got to claw our way back out of it. And I think that's why the city did the thing it did by creating a task force. We got a problem big enough to actually create a task force to solve it. We can't just, the routine is not working. Whatever we're doing normally isn't working, right? And so that's why we wrote our report in light of that aspect. I would characterize many, if not all, of the members of our task force as what you might say fiscal conservatives. And what I mean by that is there was a lot of discussion in the task force about when you build streets, you want to buy in quality and in bulk, not in quantity and piecemeal. Because if you build a 50-year road, you only have to build it once. And then maybe a little maintenance over the years, but not a full rebuilding, not frequent potholes, that kind of thing. But you build a 10-year road, well, then you're just setting yourself up for maintenance problems 10 years from now, right? And once again, I'm not questioning any decisions. We've been kind of forced by circumstance into some difficult decisions, financial decisions. But I just want to use Radio and Washington repaving that was recently done as an example. That was done as a level 3 10-year road, right? So 10 years from now, we might actually see some degradation, divoting, and potholing on our brand new streets. Because instead of spending $233,000 on that, maybe we needed to spend $1 million. Maybe we needed to spend $2 million. We didn't contemplate that because that's done. But what we have contemplated is the other difficult streets, Main and University, the main arterial pathways in our town that every citizen uses. Okay? We kept running up against that same frustration. We keep building roads that are not intended to have a long lifespan, and combined with lack of funding for a maintenance plan, this is why we have so many pockmarked and potholed roads. So there are the two major arterial streets, Main and University. They are the primary conduits of traffic within the Durant area, used by every member of the community. A little bit of a history lesson, which doesn't need to be told to the council, but might be useful for the community. We had a bond issue in the summer of 2018 that failed. It was for $20 million in streets improvements. Would be paid over 15 years, a 15-year bond. And it was, roughly in the estimation of what the city engineer said that we needed to do. Wasn't popular, not by a long shot, okay? And we put this in our report. No bones about it, just facts, okay? Wasn't popular. In fact, out of the 2,685 voters who voted on that bond issue, there's about 18,000 residents of Durant, right? 2,685 people voted. Only 948 voted in favor. So for a total percentage of the voting public of 36%. So it wasn't popular. What do we do with that information? What did we do with that information as a task force? Well, I will say this. What it meant to us, to the task force, is that, well, we have a lot of survey data showing overwhelming support of the construction of new roads and the repaving of existing roads. That roads might even be the #1 priority of Durant residents in terms of what we need to do to improve as a city. Overwhelming support for that. And very underwhelming support for finding new revenue sources. Surprise, surprise. We want to have our cake and we want to eat it too, right? No tax increases, but also lots of new roads. Okay. Well, that's, we're hardly unique as a municipality to face that challenge. That much is true. Okay. So what was our challenge as a task force? Well, we have to balance this. We have to balance the citizens' interest in roads with their skepticism of tax increases. And so our goal, to a certain extent, was to thread that needle, at least to the best of our ability. Because we looked at the city budget, we looked at available revenue streams, and we looked at the 1 penny tax that we raise from the citizens for capital improvements. And ultimately, it was the conclusion of at least a majority of the task force that if you don't reach outside of our normal pockets and go with some type of general obligation bond, we're going to constantly be behind on roads. Even if the city allocated 100% of the available revenue from the 1 penny capital improvement tax towards only streets, which I put in parentheses there is absurd because we have many more capital improvements that need to be done other than just streets. We've got to buy trash trucks, we've got to buy fire trucks, that kind of thing. We've got to improve our buildings. Every piece of sheetrock is capital, right? Even if we put all of that into this project, roads, it would produce only $7 million over the next 5 years. That doesn't even pay for Main and University, which is more than $10 million total. And we got problems with all of our roads. So that's kind of the point that the task force wants to make to the city council today. We need $6.5 million in Main Street improvements, $4.1 million in University Boulevard improvements. We propose that we put those bond issues before the voters in separate bonds which is slightly more the style that other municipalities do, break it down into chunks so that the voters can say, well, I'm for or against Main Street improvements, I'm for or against University Boulevard improvements. This would be a proposal that is $9.4 million smaller than the prior proposal. So, roughly half of what the prior proposal was, hopefully less sticker shock, maybe? At least that's part of the analysis of the task force, is maybe there'd be a little less sticker shock. What it would work out to is roughly $55 per year on a property that is valued at about $100,000. So you can kind of do your math on a property that's valued at about $200,000. We're looking at about $110 a year increase, okay? Now to compare, to raise the same amount of money, $10.6 million through the 1 penny capital improvement tax, would take until 2026. And that, once again, that's assuming that you spent 100% of all the dollars raised from that revenue source on only that, which doesn't seem to be very realistic considering the city is going to have to buy a whole bunch of other things over that period of time. Okay. To a majority of the task force, this math is simply unworkable. The pace of investment would be too slow for real change to our roads. There are a few secondary benefits to a bond. First of all, it frees up other revenue streams and it unties financial knots that have long hamstrung the city's ability to invest in itself. It allows the use of other revenue streams, particularly the 1 penny, to be used for other projects, and also frees up those other revenue streams so that we can actually create a maintenance plan for our roads, for sealing, cracks before they turn into potholes, that type of thing. It means that the city could transfer far fewer DCUA dollars towards capital improvement. Because one thing that's true about the 1 penny tax is even though most of it's tied up into debt service right now, over the next several years, a lot of that debt starts falling off. Half of the debt falls off within the next 3 years. And we can start spending that on the other roads, right? And the other projects that we need to do. We propose a maintenance plan. Durant doesn't currently have a particularly serious maintenance plan. It's not in the budget. About $360,000 annually is the estimate of the current streets supervisor for the city of Durant. This would be a project where you would treat 3 miles per month of road, putting out a crew to treat with sealant and that type of stuff, 3 miles per month of roadway. So 36 miles per year. And then if you do the math on the 196 miles that exist within the Durant city limits, well, that's about $30,000 per month. So we're looking at about $360,000 a year. But this is an investment in the longevity of our roads. That's why we're proposing it, to make our existing roads last longer so that they don't need continuous repair and maintenance. I'm almost done, and then I'm happy to answer questions. Our most important recommendation, and if there's one thing, just one thing that you take away from this presentation today or from our report in totality, and there was widespread agreement on this within the task force. We didn't agree on everything, but there is one thing that we agreed that in some form or fashion, we can't live without the capital improvement tax that's going to expire unless it's renewed by the voters in 2021. This produces $3.7 million a year for the city, and we're talking about 23% of the city's total annual revenue, okay? 23% of the city's total annual revenue. It's a lot. And so our warning is that if the citizens of Durant allow that capital improvement revenue to fall off, it is not just going to decimate our ability to invest in ourselves as a city, $3.7 million a year, but we're still going to have to do a lot of things without it that are capital improvements. We can't not buy police cars, right? We can't not buy fire trucks. We can't not repave roads, which means we're going to have to reallocate existing revenue from other places to cover the loss. It's going to have this massive cascade effect over every department in the city. And from our back-of-the-napkin calculations, a 23% hit to the city's budget, that's going to affect payroll. That's going to mean layoffs. That's going to mean pink slips. And so this is why we say this is our most important recommendation. Was there unanimity on the task force about for how long it should be extended, 10 years, 20 years. There wasn't unanimity, no. We had a majority that said we need to extend it for 20 years and that we need to spend 30% of it on roads. But one thing that we were all 100% agreed on is, in some form or fashion, we can't live without that $3.7 million a year. It has to be renewed. The citizens have to understand that. They have to be educated about what that means for our city. Okay? I am happy to answer questions. If there are any.
Does anybody have any questions? I believe, Mike, that you had a protege that was going to give a short presentation. Mr. Bachman,
I'm fine with that. I have no objection to that.
okay. If you have no objections or no one else does,
Before,
Hang on, Mr. Mayor, or Jerry, let me say one thing. I might remind the council that this is simply for, the agenda item is simply for the acceptance of the report. So let's make sure we don't get into a policy debate. The questions, if there are any, need to be directed toward clarification of the report or task force procedure or something like that. But let's make sure that we don't lean toward debate, because that's not what it's on for tonight.
okay. If you have no problem, then I believe, and Tom, we had discussed it, that it would be okay to have Mr. Bachman give an opposing side, I guess.
Yeah, so Mr. Bachman was on the task force, and the final vote on our recommendations was a 5-2 vote, and I'm happy for there to be, I guess you could say a minority report if he wishes to make one. Sure.
Okay.
Okay.
If no one has any objection,
Thank you very
thank
much.
you so much, Mike. Mr. Bachman?
Let me preface this with a little comment. The city faces huge problems with infrastructure. Everyone on the task force did a daunting job working together, trying to come up with solutions. Our differences toward the end were not in substance, only in the way we were going to present it to the people. My big concern, and I expressed it at the time, was that we present a package to the people that we could get past. I was afraid that this package might have been a little bit too large, and I'm not going to present my points. I'm just going to say when we present it to the people, I want it to pass. I want to see the city move forward. But I want to bring a package out that will get them. On every survey that we've done, the two things that the city talks about and all the citizens talk about are roads and the distrust of government, of all of us. So we need to do things that provide more trust and transparency. This task force recommendations is going to go a long way to show that. Whether or not in its present form it will pass, I don't know. I would hope that everybody will look at it very carefully. I would have hoped that we could have gone with a little higher percentage for roads, since that was the primary concern. And I thought if maybe we went 50-50, we might have gotten a better chance of passing it. And again, that was the only thing. Again, the task force did a remarkable job. They all worked together. They're all looking forward to seeing the city better. But the point is, we've got to get the citizens to vote for it and pass it. And if what I'm been told recently is true, on the next election there will be a $30 million bond for a new elementary school. And you throw another $10 million on top of that. I'm afraid that we might even risk knocking the school bond down. I don't know. But there's going to be a lot coming up in the future, and the city needs to grow. This has been a good step forward, and hopefully we'll be successful. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Charlie.
I would personally, as the city manager, like to thank Mr. Bachman and all the members that did this. I mean, I believe we had over 12 meetings and hours, and personally I'd like to thank Mr. Davis for all his time and energy that he's put into this. It's been a tremendous amount of time and effort that he's put into this, and all of them have done a great job. And just for clarification for the public to know that this acceptance of this report, the council will then have to digest it, and if there is a decision among the council, they will decide, you know, if it's going to be a 10, 15, 20 year that goes to the ballot of the people, and how much, you know, as far as the bond goes. This is simply an accepting, like Mr. Markham said earlier, this is accepting the report. It's not that we agree with the report or the council agrees with the report. It's just simply accepting the report and what the council decides as a body to do going forward. So, but again, I really appreciate it, because as a city manager, probably one of the biggest challenges we have is getting out and disseminating the information. And as Mr. Bachman said, sometimes the level of trust is somewhat skewed, and it makes it much more easier when we've got a lot of active citizens involved in it. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. And thank you for all the members that are here today that served on that task force committee. Councilman Tomlinson and myself from the city council served, and I see all the rest. They're all here, as you said, Mike. So at this point, I guess unless someone has some further discussion.
I'd like to make a couple of comments. It's been noted, well noted, but the members are all present, and it was uplifting. It was encouraging to me to have an opportunity to even be a part of that. But the discussions that went on, I can assure you, folks, it just, this may sound like something other than a few comments here, but it's beyond me, because these people, and many were there. I see Gene out there that attended, I think, every one of them. But the distrust that's been mentioned is I can't figure it out, because I see people every day working to earn that trust and so forth. But Mike, Chairman Mike Davis, your presentation this evening, Mr. Bachman, your words are always well noted. Your experience and your years, Dr. Kevin, I'm missing somebody, James, all put their heart and soul into this effort, and as a result, we're hopeful that city management, staff, and this council can take heed of it and come up with some good opportunities or good ideas or added ideas to present to you, the citizens. I know Mike, I think Mike put this together, made for a lot of good bedtime reading, city manager. But this was our kind of our Bible, and it probably weighs somewhere around 5 pounds. And but a lot of good information in there. Our history, the engineers' reports, and speculations, and so on and so forth. But in saying all of this, I want to personally thank those that served, and city manager for recommending this task force several months ago. And in saying all this, I want to move that we accept the Streets and Infrastructure Task Force Committee report.
We've had a motion to accept, and I might add that this is just a motion to accept the report, as Mike and as Tim, our city attorney, stated. We're not accepting, or we're not agreeing or disagreeing. We're just basically accepting the report. Do we have a second?
I second the motion.
We have a motion, we have a second. Would the clerk please record the vote?
Councilmember Morris,
Aye.
Councilmember Shear,
Aye.
Councilmember Tomlinson,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Brittingham,
Aye.
Mayor Groby.
Aye, motion carries. At this time, I think that we will go ahead and adjourn out of regular session may I have a motion to adjourn out of regular session and go into executive session? Is that right?
We don't need to adjourn.
Recess. We'll recess into executive session. We have two items. We have item A. Under number 3, executive session, we have item A and we have item C. Do I hear a motion that we recess out of regular session and go into executive session?
I'll move that we go into executive session.
Second?
We have a motion and a second to go into executive session. Would the clerk please record the vote?
Councilmember Morris,
Aye.
Councilmember Shear,
Aye.
Councilmember Tomlinson,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Brittingham,
Aye.
Mayor Groby.
Aye. We are in recess.